It's now 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. Thank you for staying with us. I'm Ana Cabrera reporting from New York, and it is 5 p.m. in Rome. This morning here in the U.S., the afternoon in Italy, the conclave to choose the next Pope of the Catholic Church is just about to begin at the Vatican. The cardinals are now there inside the Sistine Chapel. 133 of them are in the process of taking an oath. This is what they do, each individual, starting with the most senior to the most junior. This is before the conclave, like no other in history. Once their oath is complete, we're going to see the doors of the Sistine Chapel shut, closing the cardinals inside, where they will begin a vote, shrouded in secrecy, to elect the next leader of the Catholic Church, about 1.4 billion Catholics all around the world. NBC News correspondent Claudio Lavanga is still with us from the Vatican, along with Vatican author, historian, and guide Liz Lev, and MSNBC contributor Father John Bartunek also joining us. Claudio, talk to us about what we're watching right now. What do we know about the oath these cardinals are taking?
Well, only minutes ago, the Cardinal Pietro Parolin, the senior cardinal bishop who will preside over the conclave, has read this very long oath he took from the Apostolic Constitution, in which he asked every single cardinal to swear to protect the Church's freedom and the secrecy of the conclave, and to avoid secular politics in their votes. And now every single cardinal, in order of importance, so first the bishops, the priests, and then the deacons, are lining up to swear the oath and just say, "And I, Cardinal so-and-so, swear, live and swear, so help me God, and these holy Gospels of God, which I touch with my hand," of course, touching, as you can see, the book of Gospels. And after this, we will see that famous moment of the closing of the door and the extra omnes, the everyone out, when finally the conclave will begin.
These oaths could take a while, maybe 40, 50 minutes, because, again, there are 133 cardinals participating in this conclave. Liz, once the oath wraps up, then what do we expect in terms of the voting process? How does that roll out?
Well, once the oath wraps up, the book is taken away, and they replace they place on that table with the urn that each cardinal will sit down and will write on the little piece of paper that is sitting in front of him on his desk the name of the person for whom he is going to vote. Then the same process that you're seeing here. Each cardinal individually holding up his ballot must process through the chapel up to the urn and then put his vote into the urn. So again, this is a very interesting conclave, even logistically, having such a high number. If the cap was 120 and we have 133, putting in the extra seats, the extra time, it's just a very interesting series of challenges.
And it's going to be extra long.
And it's going to be extra long.
So we may have to wait a little longer than usual to see that smoke, Anna.
Because after all, then they have to check and make sure every vote is accounted for. So they have to count all 133 and make sure there are all the votes there, and then they read them. So we're in for an evening.
Yes.
Yeah, and there are interesting dynamics. Interesting dynamics, given, again, so many of these cardinals in the conclave are meeting each other for the first time. The New York Times says there are so many unfamiliar faces. Cardinals are wearing name tags. The Vatican guest house for out-of-towners coming to choose the next pope is overbooked. Daily Vatican meetings have taken on the feel of theological speed dating sessions leading up to this conclave. Father, how do you expect that to impact the voting process?
I think it's going to it might delay the voting process. People are going to kind of, have a chance to see who's first on everyone's mind. But there's something else I think that I'd like to mention on that. There's, the fact that they haven't met each other or worked together on committees is definitely an important, factor. And that's why they had so much time these last few days, these last 9 days, to get together, get to know each other. But there is there's a common background that they all share. To become a Catholic priest and then a bishop and a cardinal, there's kind of an education that's shared. There's an experience that's shared. So there is this sense of brotherhood among the cardinals, even with the different opinions that they may have, even with the contrasting opinions they may have. There's a sense of we're in this together. We want to make the right choice. We want to be good instruments of the Holy Spirit. And I think that's important to keep in mind. You know, they pray for each other, they pray with each other, and they have that shared experience of living the priesthood, of serving the people of God in so many different parts all over the world, but serving the people of God, serving the gospel. And so that kind of creates this, I think it creates a bond that it's going to impact, I think, how the vote goes, how they interact with each other throughout these days.
What are the factors you think beyond just those kind of personal relationships or that brotherhood, that bond that you speak of in terms of their shared experiences in some ways, given the steps that they've taken to arrive in this role that they all have and share as cardinals? What do you see as the key factors influencing who they ultimately pick to lead the church?
Yeah, I think there's some things that the Catholic Church will never change and can't change. We receive certain things. And then there are certain things that can change, like processes or certain organizational things. But the thing that's most influenced by who the Pope is what's emphasized. The whole message of the church, the whole nature of the church, we exist to spread the good news of Jesus Christ throughout the world as compellingly as possible. But there's different ways of doing that. And how do we do it compellingly? So the Pope is really the leader who influences what we emphasize the most. We saw with Pope Francis, he emphasized a lot of social and political issues. We saw with Pope John Paul II, St. John Paul II, he emphasized the faith, the centrality of Christ, and he also emphasized the importance, the dignity of the human person from God's perspective. So the Pope, as the leader of the bark of Peter, the ship of St. Peter, really will decide kind of what's emphasis, or will really kind of, and so that's what they're going to be thinking about as they choose who do we want to be Pope? What do we want to be emphasized? What needs to be emphasized so the Church can live her mission fully and joyfully in these coming years? So that's going to be the factor that I think that will most influence kind of who they vote for.
I mean, this Sistine Chapel is going to be sealed off here shortly. They don't have their phones. They don't have access to news in the conclave. Liz, why is that important, the fact that this is happening sort of in a bubble?
In a series of what we're talking about is freedom. What we are really talking about is the liberty on the part of the cardinals to vote for the person for whom the Holy Spirit moves them. And so instead of having outside information that perhaps you should be worried about this problem or perhaps people are going to think that, the idea is that they're able to act in a space that is safe. The design of the Sistine Chapel when it was first built in 1477 was to give it one entrance and one exit. And that way they could be closed in and they could be safe, because there's a historical conclaves where the Romans attacked the cardinals. The idea is, whether it's to avoid outside influence from rulers trying to tell you what to do, influence from the media, fear of what your family might think, they have to be able to act in total freedom. And that's the reason why it takes place like this.
And also historically, and I mean, this has been going on for hundreds of years, and until at least the cardinals decided to take their role upon themselves to elect a pope and also to lock themselves inside the place, in this case, the Sistine Chapel, the election of the pope was a matter also of noble families who wanted to just push for, their preferred ones, even their relatives, to become popes.
So popes were once chosen by acclamation up until about 1000. So you would just get all your friends to go sit in the piazza and say, oh, I want Uncle Bob. And so next thing you know, you have these popes that really constitute a very, very terrible moment in the church. And the church learned from that. And so it created a system of electors, of cardinals. Then it created a way to keep the cardinals separate, because then they had little problems with the cardinals themselves. And then they created a way for the cardinals. And even up until 1996 and even up until Benedict XVI, they're tweaking the process constantly.
But Anna, also, if I may, the actual name conclave is very fascinating, and the reason why they're locked inside the Sistine Chapel, that comes from the 13th century, when the cardinals, that was the longest election in history. After 1,000 days following the death of the Pope there, they just couldn't make their mind up. They couldn't find a compromise. This was not in Rome, it was in Viterbo. It's a town that is about an hour and a half drive from here, from Rome. And at that point, the people there grew so unnerved and frustrated that they decided to force the cardinals to lock themselves into the papal palace there. It was where they were holding the election, and just ration food and water until they made a decision, and that worked. And since then, essentially, it has been the cum clave, the wheat, it means wheat key in Latin, right?
Since then, it's gotten better. The 1,006-day conclave was rather a low part, a low point in the conclave.
It's been 2 days.
I think three cardinal electors died while that was happening, so we're going to hope none of that happens this time around.
Oh, my. And talking about the, the Sistine Chapel where this is all taking place, some of us have had the privilege of visiting there. They receive about 5 million visitors every year that go through the Sistine Chapel. What's really interesting is, again, that this is such a conclave is such an event that is steeped in tradition and history, with 150 of these conclaves having taken place inside the Sistine Chapel, dating all the way back to 1492. And you talked about what came prior to that, but it doesn't look like this typically when you're a visitor going into the Sistine Chapel. I mean, to see now all of these desks laid out, we know that things have been sealed. Again, there's sort of signal scrambling technology to make sure that there's no contact with the outside world. What is the significance more broadly in terms of informing ultimately the smoke we see coming out of the Sistine Chapel down the road, Claudio, of having, this inside this most sacred space that is also very accessible on any other given day?
Well, perhaps the Sistine Chapel is the most recognizable icon, essentially, of the Catholic Church, not only because of where it is, it's also who painted it. It wasn't just Michelangelo. There is the whole book of Genesis there painted on the ceiling. There is the famous creation of Adam. There is the Last Judgment, as we can see in some of these pictures. And even the cardinals themselves, when they enter the Sistine Chapel, they probably feel this upon them. They feel like they are in this small enclosed world of God, which is where the Last Judgment is. They are making a judgment in front of the Last Judgment, and they are being judged by God for doing that. But I will ask Liz, who is actually one of the most renowned experts of the Sistine Chapel in the world, so she can probably give us a bit more of that.
I want to take our attention away from the ceiling in the Last Judgment to specifically point out two paintings in the Sistine Chapel that answer the question that you have been asking and that everybody is asking. How do we handle this politicking? As they walk, you see the gate in front of you where the cardinals walk in to put in their vote. To the left and the right of that gate, there are two paintings that were done at the time the chapel was built in 1482. One painted by the famous Sandro Botticelli, one painted by an artist named Perugino. One shows Jesus giving the keys to Peter, and that line from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 16, "You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church." That's the reason why the Pope is the Pope. And it's so calm, and it's beautiful, and there's triumphal arches. On the opposite side, Botticelli painted a story from the life of Moses, when Moses was trying to give his authority to his brother, and everybody fought. And what do you see? Violence, a disaster, crumbling buildings. And so as the cardinals walked that last step into the voting precinct to take their place, the last two paintings they saw, this is what happens if you accept with peace and serenity the result of the conclave, and the chaos and the destruction that will happen if you don't. It's an amazing message.
It's amazing.
Claudio Lavanga, Liz Lev, Father John Bartunek, thank you all. Please stay close. We're going to keep our eyes on the Vatican throughout this hour. We'll be back with more after a quick break.
Etego, Dieudonné cardinalis, nzapala inga. Respondeu, voveu, at you.